Hey, this is Huck. If you want to watch this top 3 asshole keep doing esports content, subscribe to Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, I'm here with Just Jerky's minion for this one, but it's another one of the Patreon discussions. And actually, I'll address that at the beginning of the show for people who are wondering, because obviously there's been a couple now. There was one I did a couple back where it was just me and Zen. Like, obviously, there's a limited number of people who give $100 or more. It's a small group. People have different obligations. Since we've had a couple now, there's only been like one person. I'll try for next year to figure out the people who at the moment haven't done an episode yet and see if they actually have any time in their schedule free and do some episodes around then so everyone gets a turn. And also, I actually think next year I'll be able to like increase the number of people on the Patreon, because a couple of the big promises I made are almost ready. Like, my website is like pretty much like halfway developed, so that'll be coming soon. And then the other big thing I promised people was to get some kind of feature up where there'll be like a podcast version, like an MP3 version of the show. But I have a clever like sort of loophole on that one that you'll find out about later as to how I can do it, but at the same time not wreck all the ad revenue on YouTube. So I think I've actually found the solution for that. As I said on the site itself, I never actually promised I'd do it because I didn't know if it was like plausible to do it or not. But I found a way I think makes sense that will simultaneously mean if you are someone who has like limited data and you can't watch stuff on your phone or whatever, and I know a lot of people watch stuff on mobile now. I don't personally, so you know, I had to like learn this. But if you are someone who has that problem, there is a solution that will mean in the future, in theory, you can watch everything, just like download it, put on your MP3 player, but there'll be a caveat to it that you'll find out about. So anyway, without further ado, let's start the episode. So Jerkies, there's a lot obviously is going on in the world of esports, right? Let me just check with you. So I know from back in the day you used to follow like Quake, obviously Counter-Strike for a long time. You still you watch like, do you watch League of Legends?
I do.
Okay. And you watch Overwatch a bit?
Specifically, LCK specifically.
And do you watch Overwatch at all?
No. I went to the Overwatch League's finals just to meet up with a friend of mine. But
was it good?
I don't know. I didn't went in the stadium. Just hung out in Paris a little bit.
Oh, right, for the World Cup one.
Yeah.
Right, I see. Okay. I thought you meant like the one in like Brooklyn, New York or something. That's
no.
why I thought it was weird that you said you didn't go inside the venue. You just went and stood outside like, oh, well, that's enough. I've seen it now.
No, I just went to Paris for that one and just have fun with with a friend of mine. So.
Okay. Actually, along those lines then, because I saw you address this on, I can't remember if it was on YouTube or somewhere, but people always ask like, why are you all over the place? Like, you're always seen like donating. Obviously, you're on my Patreon, you're on the By the Numbers Patreon. I think people are seeing you in Richard's chat or something. So people wonder, like, how are you in a position where you can donate to all this stuff or whatever?
I work 7 days on 7, 12 hours every day. I do have a nice vacation schedule every year, but only because I just work a fuck ton of hours. That's how.
Okay. Do you like your job? Is it good?
I absolutely love my job. It keeps me challenged every day. As long as it keeps giving me a challenge, I'll keep on doing it.
Because you know the funny thing is, when you said that, like you were, that's one of the reasons you're into this stuff, because it means you have like podcasts to listen to, stuff to do in the background when you're working. What people wouldn't realize is that's actually one of the main reasons I personally watch podcasts and got into them. Because way back in the day, when all my content was those like 10,000 word text pieces, which take forever to research and they take a long time to write, you just sat there for so many hours, especially on the research part, sometimes just clicking on sites. You're not even doing anything like particularly like cerebrally challenging. So what I used to do back in the day when it first began was, that's why I used to listen to that Joe Rogan podcast when he first began it, like before it was even the Joe Rogan Experience, when it was like just him and Brian Redban.
Oh, it's just him and Brian.
Yeah, just a few random mates. It wasn't even on like Twitch at the time. It was on some other site. I can't remember.
Some weird site.
Some random streaming site that only he used, you know, Ustream maybe. I can't remember.
Yeah,
but whatever it was, the whole point is, yeah, if it's an episode with a guest I really love, yeah, that one I might save and watch when I'm just chilling, you know. But what I actually did love was, even the stuff you're not as interested in, because you like the setup of like who the person is talking about and you know them already, and it feels kind of comfortable. Yeah, you can just put it on the background. It's a great way to, like, what I love about the podcasts in that sense is it's not the most super serious shit ever. So if you miss a bit or you're distracted, you go, whatever. You don't like rewind it, you just keep going, you know. But if it is interesting, then it's like, oh, there's something to listen to while I do something. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. I can see why I think that's actually the real secret as to why podcasts got huge, is because people needed stuff to do in the background. Like, you notice, that's actually one of the reasons I think why content does better in League of Legends, because it's actually a lot easier if you're playing a game of League of Legends to have something on a second screen, because there's a lot more downtime, you know, like if you're going back to lane or something. And also the game sounds aren't particularly necessary. Like there's very rarely a particular game sound you have to hear that you're doing the game. Whereas the problem is if you play CS, you can have stuff in the background, but like you kind of got to choose between them, haven't you? Because if you have the volume loud enough to hear someone, odds are you can't hear all the footsteps and stuff. So it's like for CS, I think it's a bit harder to make it work.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like games like Quake and CS where sound is absolutely necessary, you can't have those on. I just don't play CS without, like, if I put music on, I can't play serious.
Yeah.
No.
That's one of the reasons why I actually think it was my Quake background that made me so pissed off with the sound quality in CSGO, because in CSGO, I know a lot of people agree with me. Like, here's the funny thing. The map that made people agree with me of how bad the sound was Nuke, obviously, because Nuke has just problems that you can't actually resolve. Like, they're clearly there for everyone. But the difference is, I still think the sound's bad on a lot of the maps. Like it's so bizarre, the maps. Like, I'll give you a great example. If you're going on Mirage to the B bomb site as a terrorist, it is ridiculous how you can just hear people who are in like the short area inside the site area as though there was no walls, and yet there are other parts of maps where there's an even smaller real world wall and like you can't hear shit there. Like, you know, for some reason no sound just goes through that. So like it's so bizarre how intuitive it is, because the funny thing is, for anyone who doesn't know, the most famous game for this is Quake 2, because in Quake 2 they actually had flawed sound the other way, which is it was too good. Like in Quake 2, if you're playing on the most famous map, The Edge, DM1, you can actually hear a guy jumping in the water, even though you are the equivalent of being on like a skyscraper on the other side of a city almost, you know, like it's actually ridiculous how good. But as a result, if you play Quake 2 and you're in like a duel, you have to be always super cognizant of every little sound you hear. Like, what is that? There's an armor shard, right? He's probably there. Like, oh, what's that? The grenade launcher. So because of that, when I came to the world of CS, I was already primed to like listen very carefully. And I always found in 1.6, the sound is amazing in that game as well, because obviously it's got the Quake 1 engine. So it's like a very old school sound technology. I've mentioned this in the past as well, but to wrap this anecdote up, unfortunately, even though in the early days I used to just think, wow, CSGO must have been made so badly, because the reality of the game is it wasn't developed as like a massive project by Valve. You know, they farmed out to the Hidden Path Entertainment people, and they got it made pretty quickly, if you remember the turnaround. So, you know, I always thought it was just poor, you know, like incompetence on their part that made the sound bad. But I've referenced this on some podcasts in the past. And maybe if I can find, maybe I'll try and find the actual article and put it in the description for people to check. But there was a very interesting article came out, or piece of information rather, about a year ago, I think. It was either at the beginning of 2018 or sometime in 2017, where someone actually who knows about basically like the technology of sound cards said that one of the reasons why you couldn't replicate sound like in 1.6 was something bizarre, like there'd actually been like a technology dispute with, I think it was Creative, because they were the main people obviously pushing the sound cards forward and their drivers and stuff. I think it was Creative. They were the ones that had whatever the technology was, and something along the lines of like they no longer had the patent for that, or someone who had the patent didn't want it to be used in something bizarre like that, meant that actually we've sort of gone backwards in time on sound technology. And so it's not actually even Valve's fault. Like, no one can basically have the same sound as that original game, which sounds like, I'm not sure 100% makes sense, but it does sort of, you know, like when I read it,
does make sense.
Logic.
Like if you have someone who actually has the patent and he says, I don't want you all to use it anymore, then yeah, if he still holds the rights, you
like something to those. That end or something.
Sounds
I
actually
exact details, but there was like it had logic to it when it was explained. Because I have to say, even though I'm certain there are other games probably have slightly better sound than CS, I will say I've never played another game that's like a modern day game that had amazing sound quality on it. And a lot of it's quite ropey on all of it. Whereas you'd think logically, like graphics get better, that'd be one of the main things that should be getting better every year. If anything, it should be the best sound ever now, not in some game I'm talking about for like 1998 Quake 2 or something. You know, like, that doesn't even make sense, does it?
It's true. It's actually ridiculous if you think about it, yeah.
I've got a question for you. So since the end of the year is almost upon us, and everyone is, I say everyone, I'm being a bit sarcastic when I say that, everyone is with bated breath waiting for HLTV's top 20 players of the year, because they want to know where these players fall in there. So I've always found it very bizarre to me that the same people who, if I made the same article, I've done it every year, in fact, like Thorin's top 10 players of the year, they'll debate me all day long on whether this guy should be number 7 or number 5, or like, why is this guy number 9? He should be number 14. You know, like, they'll go super hard on me. But if HLTV.org puts it out, people act as though like that's God saying like who it was. Like, all right, turns out actually I was wrong. Simple was the best player. Like, it's like they think it's like official somehow. Like, you know, it's not. You know, it's just a website, right? It's not even like Valve makes it official. So Anyway, that's a side rant. My question to you is this. If you were making your top 10 players of the year, and you're thinking of the players that will be in that list, etc., do you have like a special criteria that you use? Like, for example,
on land
would a lot of the Astralis players make the list for you?
I'd have 2 in there, yeah. If in top 10, I would have 2 people in there from Astralis, yeah.
Because I mean, it hasn't come out yet, so it's a perfect time to mention this. I'm going to go ahead and guess, especially because Greb himself had some tournaments where he had very high stats. I think there is a very high chance that like 4 Astralis players will be top 10 in HLTV.org, which I personally think is kind of outrageous. Like, doesn't even make sense, Like, how can you imply that, the 4th best Astralis player is better than whoever, say, the best player is on... I mean, at this point in time, I think I have a team who probably won't make it up. Probably Mav Sports might have some players below it. Like they might get 1 player, 2 players. Because remember, there's only 10 spots. Like you can't, not that many.
Limited,
so. Yeah.
Probably have Simple in there, Nico, and after that one, yeah, still Cold Zero somewhere in there.
Sure, yeah.
Device, I would actually put Device 2nd or 3rd.
I just find it kind of bizarre though, because here's the
Dupree
thing.
in there, yeah.
Definitely in traditional sports, role players on championship teams get overrated. Like that's clear. Yes, that phenomenon exists. Like I'll give you a great example. I've given it many times. When I was a boy growing up and I first got into soccer, football, was when the Manchester United team that won all those Premier Leagues first was created. It was in I think like 93 or something, And when this team was created, when they got Eric Cantona, when they would win the Premier League every year, all the pleb kids who followed football would try and tell me ridiculous stuff that like, every player on the Man United team was like the best at their roles. So they were picking players who like famously, for example, they had like a couple of defenders who were like, they were good players, but they weren't the best. It's like, they fit with the system or they came up through Manchester United or they played with this other guy for many years. So they had like a rapport, And I used to try and explain this even back then to kids of like, well, that doesn't make sense, does it? Like whoever I used to tell them, for example, clearly whoever like the best goal scorer on the 2nd best team is probably better than most of these defenders we're talking about. Like, logically, Man United doesn't have 11 of the best players, do they? That's unreasonable. But what's bizarre is, even in that world, none of them were really ever making that argument I just gave there. No one was really saying like, well, even the worst defender's better than the striker on the other team. But what's mad is that is legitimately, in modern day esports, in CSGO and League of Legends, that is the default mode that people take for stuff. Like, I can't handle this one, Jerkies, where, like, in League of Legends, everyone was super against me last year when I kept trying to point out that, like, it's ridiculous to make out like Hauntzer is by default the best top laner. Like, it's at least a discussion, between him and Someday and maybe Flame when Immortals was good. You can at least have the discussion. Oh, everyone in the scene was telling me I'm a moron, didn't know what I'm talking about. The same people now are like, yeah, Hauntzer's shit this year. It's like, what? So now because his team loses, he's just automatically bad, is he? I've always found it bizarre. Like, don't you think about it crazy that like the best example ever is those, I'll use the HLTV.org list, is the 2016 one where I think they had Nico something nuts like 11th.
Yeah.
Nico, 11. Like, and even though their logic, by the way, was like, well, he didn't go to like lots of finals and stuff. It's like,
yeah, sure.
Come on, bro. He's still better than some of these people who are above him in this list, though. Come on.
If Nico didn't go to lots of finals, can we still look at his stats individually and compare them to some of these other people at the same roles? Let's see how good these guys did, like... have to compare them individually against one another, and if they play different roles, you also have to take that into account for. I don't get people that said like the same thing when SK was good, like, oh, SK has like 3 of the best players in these positions. Like, do you really think so? Like, maybe, but there's a debate to be had that some players are actually better than number 3, like number 1 and number 2 might be the absolute insane on the list, but number 3 certainly isn't in the same team. It has to even out somewhere, because you also have to have a supportive component. Your IGL is obviously going to have diminished game results because he has to take his mind into the game.
That's why I always used to get mad triggered by like the perfect examples of where like the intersection is between like this thinking and then an outcome that makes it ridiculous is, for example, on the very same list I was talking about where they had the HLTV.org list. And again, I'm going off the top of my head, but I think Nico was either like 9th or 11th or something. He was like quite low down at that point. That same year, I believe they actually put Fallen 2nd. And what is so mad about that to me is like, he plays with the person who you've put at number 1. Like, think about your own logic. If Fallen did every single key press exactly the same that year, but he didn't have coldzera in the same server, odds are he wins maybe none of those tournaments, therefore he wouldn't have been the MVP of any of those tournaments, therefore he wouldn't probably be even in the top 10 on your list. Yeah, he did exactly the same stuff. That's the part that doesn't make sense, because if this is a team award, great, but it's an individual award. That's the part that I can't handle about it. It's like, the point I'm making here is, I don't punish a guy like that. I try to put him in context, you know. But you do punish a guy who's on a lesser team because his team can't win, when you then say that his exact performance, which was amazing, wasn't good enough because his team didn't win the tournament. Like, that's why I get why fans like it. Listen, if no one does a top 10 and if no one with sort of some authority does it, it's not as interesting. So I'm into it for fans in that sense. I get why they like it every year. They want to see where someone who's, you know, put more attention in would rank everyone. I've just always thought the criteria is a bit off. But anyway, one of the reasons I bring it up is this, Jerkies. I want you to predict this, because obviously we don't know any of the top 20 yet, the official one.
I have to predict.
So here's my question for you, okay? This is my question. And you're going to think it's an easy question initially, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you think they will put Simple number 1 on the HLTV.org list?
Let's see. How many tournaments has he won this year?
I think he only won something like 4. And a couple of them were the smaller ones.
Yeah, right.
3, I think. Yeah, 3, I think maybe. No, wait a second. Let me think.
Let me check.
They also won a Blast Pro Series, so maybe 4. They won the Star Series Season 5, CSGO Asia Championship, ESL Cologne, and did they win a Blast Pro Series? I think they did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they won the one that Astralis bombed. So
they won the...
Yeah, Copenhagen.
Yeah, Copenhagen.
So they won 4 titles. Like, you know, 2 of them were a bit smaller. But, you know, Star Series pretty good still. Obviously, ESL Cologne, massive event. Okay, so he won 4 events. I think Astralis won like 10 or something, you know. FaZe maybe 3 or 4.
You have to look at, like, how many second places did they get? The Face It Major itself against Astralis. You have to take into account that they went, let's see.
They had a bunch. Star Series
They had a bunch of them.
Yeah. DreamHack Marseille.
So, in theories of performance-wise, when you see he hard carries the team basically from the start of the year until Electronic comes online, I'd say yes. But
okay, but that's if you were picking it.
Yeah,
do you think they will put him number 1?
If they have to pick him, depends how hard they value the winning factor in Astralis being that dominant, you know. And Device is a prime candidate for a top 3 spot, in my opinion. So would they put him number 1? Depends how highly they value certain things. But I can see a world in where they put him number 1, obviously.
Because, you know, the interesting thing is, everyone else seems to think that, like, oh, don't be silly. Of course, Simple will be number 1, you know. And in fact, people...
It depends on your criteria.
People were even using the logic of like, oh, but HLTV.org love stats. And it's like, no, that is exactly why I actually think it's an interesting question, because it is not a slam dunk for HLTV.org to put him number 1. Because if you look at every single past year, the number 1 player is nearly always the person on the team that won the most tournaments. That is just the way it goes. And part of that is because they actually do take into account things like how many MVP awards did you win? How many times did you like place first in the tournament, because obviously that means you played it well in a final as well. That's their logic, right? So by the same logic in the past of why coldzera was number 1, they should actually, by their own internal logic, have to give it to Device. He should have to be number 1. I don't think they actually will, though. This is the interesting thing there. Is that I actually think, Jerkies, that they're going to fuck up their own internal logic. Give it to Simple, because let's face it, like, I think the crowd, the public will go ham if Simple doesn't win. And I think that they will actually sort of like use different criteria, because like I don't claim to know all the criteria. I can only know what I've ever read in those articles, but based on every logic I've ever heard from the people who make that list, it would make it Device, just to be internally consistent, you know. He basically did this year what coldzera did the other years.
Yeah, it's true. That is true. He did win the most. He had a lot of MVPs. Yeah, going by that logic, yeah, I could see a world where they don't actually put him in first.
Especially because, I'll give you a piece of information a lot of people to this day do not actually know. This is why it's so funny, like I told you, that when HLTV.org says something, people take it as though like, oh, that's the status quo, whatever they said goes. Which I get, because, you know, people naturally look to authority figures. But the reason it's bizarre to me is if you've ever actually noticed, when it's like a close race, Peter, who does the MVP votes on a lot of the HLTV.org ones, always gives a piece of criteria, which is that he counts your performance in a map that your team wins as more important than in a map that you lose. Well, by that logic, even if simple, I believe he actually has like mildly higher stats than Device, even for tournaments that Device won, like, you know, collectively for the year in big events. Well, that wouldn't matter because technically all those great performances Simple had, like, for example, I'll give you a great example. That Star Series Season 4 earlier this year where he won the MVP, he obviously dropped his 40 kills in the game they lost, the Mirage game, right? Well, by the logic of HLTV.org, that shouldn't count for much in his MVP award. That should be like, you know, not an important game. So by that logic, Device should win automatically. He was winning all the fucking games.
If that's a real criteria, I think that's a messed up one because you should value everything even if you lose them, because every map counts, regardless of whether you win it or not. That is. I
agree. Like, yeah, for me, I certainly agree with the same thing. It's just that I think for them, again, this is why when I did that,
if that's an actual stat, then fuck on, toss out everything, because that's ridiculous if you decide your MVPs on that criteria. Like, oh, so a guy who drops 45 kills twice, maybe in 2 maps he loses. Oh, he can't get an MVP just because he lost maps over a guy who maybe 30 bombed and like won the map twice.
Well, that's the thing is like,
it's absurd. Come on.
To me, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose the map because the idea is it's an individual award and it's like, how good were you, basically. But if you notice, the modern day way people take the word valuable is they can just change that to mean whatever they want, basically. So, for example, I can already tell you what the logic would probably be, and I'm trying to actually steelman it here, not strawman it, which is they would say, well, the person who, you know, wins a map for you is more valuable than the one who can't win the map, which, again, as you just said, you could make an obvious mathematical example of where that would be ridiculous. But if that's the logic they've set up, then it logically follows that it's the people who win the most maps are going to end up being the MVPs. So, unfortunately, that's just their criteria. Anyway, I thought I'd ask you because I thought people would probably be surprised that that's my prediction anyways. I don't think it's that clear cut. And actually, here's the problem is, on the one hand, I want them to put Simple because I think he should be the number one. But then on the other hand, I actually think for the sake of their own internal consistency, they should put Device based on what they did for the past years. Because I think whenever you make a list, I made this point on my show I did with Loco for Worlds. It's actually biased as fuck if you make a list and just pick people who you like. Like, what you're supposed to actually do is before you make the list, you figure out all your criteria and you figure out, like, what would I do on like a borderline case? Like, you know, this guy's slightly better in this category than another. You're supposed to think about that before you make any of the lists, so that way every person on the list is completely consistent in terms of the logic of where they are. And that's actually, by the way, probably the biggest problem I have with the HLTV.org list.
It's not listed anywhere.
Yeah, if I go, first of all, I can't know how all these people got picked, and then secondly, if you look at like some of the names, it seems to me at least like some of them got on one piece of criteria and then for that wasn't counted for a different person, they went on a different one, because the list itself goes all over the place. It's so bizarre. Like, what's bizarre is on the one hand they will put in a teammate of someone amazing, but then at the same time the star player of a smaller team can be higher up than a different teammate. It's like, I never understood how that coherently was supposed to make sense, but maybe
actually, I have a good remembrance on that one. Yeah, in the 2015 or 16 one, Scream was in the top 10, right?
I think it was 16, yes, because of the G2 lineup. Scream and Shocks.
And then his team won a few tournaments, but they didn't like go absolutely bonkers, you know, in the rest of them. So how can you then have him in a top 10 when there are several players that you could argue deserve that spot more in that year?
Oh, I agree with you, because here's the funny thing. He would have been in my top 10. I think he was for that year. I did the same logic because, again, I'm counting all games. I'm counting how you play generally. And he was a sick individual player that year. But I agree with you. Logically, in the way that they make their top 10, it doesn't make sense he's in there. Because actually, G2 at the end of the year, like, they hadn't won that many tournaments. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Special in 2016, so
like,
by that logic.
That was the same year where, like, Na'Vi was in, like, you know, like fucking 8 top 4s and loads of like, by that logic, there should have been 3 or 4 Na'Vi players. But oh well, right, let's move on to another topic anyway. Is there something in League of Legends? What about this? Because obviously in League of Legends, first of all, there's a million roster moves. You can take your pick on any of those.
Oh, we
there's
just
all the different regions.
SKT firstly win and then get smashed, you know? That's a nice topic. I think they haven't figured out everything yet on this lineup. The first match, it looked really promising because they really nailed their opponent stone dead. And the second one where they got smashed by Genji, was it? I think.
Gen G, yeah.
Yeah. They looked just lost in certain transitions. They just looked lost.
What about, do you actually think that SKT will be the best Korean team? Like, will they win the LCK? Because now we actually know the lineups, you know, before obviously some were still kind of uncertain.
I still think Griffin should be very highly accounted for. Like the way they played last year, even though some of them were rookies, most of them were rookies, right? I think you should look at their individual performance and the cohesion that that team had. They played individually great on 3 people, I'd say. Not all 5, 3. And then 2 were average. They can hold their own. Would SKT be currently with Teddy, who is very meta dependent, I feel? The funnel meta suited him, right? If you look at the current meta, I don't think it works out for him. But we'll see.
Because the thing that's weird about the LCK at the moment is when I heard all those big like initial roster moves, if you remember, the weird thing about the offseason for Korea was it started with people just sort of saying who wasn't on their team, just saying like, right, we're keeping this one player, we're keeping these 2 players. So what's bizarre is it felt super exciting immediately because you were like, holy shit, like, you know, they're all going to like restock up, etc. But if you actually look at it, what's bizarre is because of like a certain teams like missing out on like a player that they had penciled in or thought they were going to get. The best example for me clearly is KT Rolster, because I think the reason why KT Rolster ended up with an AD carry most people will never have heard of is because I am pretty sure they thought that they were going to get Prey as their AD carry and they were waiting, and then I think at the last moment he just said like, actually I'm not going to play for anyone, and they had to just get this guy because KT Rolster on paper has like an amazing roster, but then you get to the AD carry and you're like, yeah, what happened there? You know, you were making this sick team. Then you go and look at like King's Own Dragon X. Suddenly, you know, you've got a whole bunch of players that are sick. You've got Deft, you've got Tussin, but then the rest of the team's like, yeah, it's all right, I guess. You know, could be good. Like, don't know. As you said with Gen G, so okay, Gen G signed like fucking Peanut. What a great player.
Yeah.
They've still got a couple of the good players like
QV, okay.
good. But again, you know, the roster's not that crazy, you know, like who the fuck's life? Fly's okay, I guess. Like, yeah, what's crazy when you
look
at it?
As a mid laner, I think he's actually deficient to like at least 4 people in the LCK.
Like, I actually don't think, aside from SK Telecom, I don't think that many of the lineups in LCK are that crazy. Like, as he said, Griffin kept the same lineup. The Damn One guys, they were actually the people who beat the SKT in the Kesper Cup. They've obviously had some kind of hype around them because they've done well against scrims against teams of worlds, and then obviously in this Kesper Cup. A Freak of Freaks is all right, but actually the sad thing is I feel a bit underwhelmed. Like, as much as I thought it was going to be the craziest off-season ever, and it was sort of because Korea is usually so like stable, you know. But these actually aren't that crazy, these rosters. Like, this doesn't look like the nightmare year where Korea just shits on everyone's face, you know. Like, it's pretty good. You know, some good teams, but there's not that many sort of like clear dominant teams on paper, I don't think.
I think we still have to look at the KT roster with gauging eyes, because it has BDD, it has Score, it has Smeb. I mean, it's pretty goddamn good to start with. Griffin, yeah, pretty eyeballing team, because they were really.
The problem for them,
they should have made like the final.
Oh, of course,
they should have made like Worlds.
Well, bear in mind, they almost won the actual LCK, so that would have automatically like put them in position, I think, anyway. So like, the sad thing about that one is, yeah, I'm with you on that one. The problem I have with the Griffin angle is because they are rookies, like, I have to see what happens when they play more, you know. Like, I want to see if some people just drop off completely.
You don't know if the meta changes and someone goes to shit, you know.
It happens. You never know, right? And also, you just never know. Some players, it's one of the things, actually, it's why esports is actually very frustrating, is with the exception of like Quake and CSGO, I don't think there's any game in esports that has like consistent performances in the way that sports do. Because if you think about like in soccer, American football, basketball, if you're like the best player, you could be the best player for like 5 years in a row. You could, or you know, worst case scenario, you're like the 3rd best player the year after. The turnover in esports is crazy, except for the really godlike players, you know, the simples, the fakers. Aside from those guys, and even then, those guys can have their dips. If you're just like a normal good player, it's kind of wild how a year later you can just be on the trash heap. It's kind of wild. Like, what can you think of any theory crafting as to why that would be?
Well, certain people are very meta dependent, and then I recently saw several people discuss the topic of burnout as well. Could also be a reason. while people do shit.
Actually, we could talk about that then, because what you're referring to is, I mean, obviously, first of all, it's always going to be a topic that will come up because, I mean, just a fact that, especially like League of Legends, especially Overwatch, when these players live in a house, you see them burn out. But the context for anyone who doesn't know was quite interesting because what actually happened was Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, not Dallas Cowboys, the Dallas Mavericks rather, the NBA franchise, is someone who people might not know, but has actually been interested in esports for many years now, because what he does, as you'd expect as like a very successful businessman, is he looks for promising areas and sectors that are starting to grow. So people don't realize, because he doesn't own anything in esports, as far as I can tell, except maybe like an NBA 2K team, is people might think he's coming along as like a Johnny come lately, like he's just come along like everyone else, like, oh, what's this esports thing I heard about? But actually, that's what's interesting about Mark Cuban to me, is the reason why he simultaneously doesn't own a big esports team, but knows a lot about it. Those two details are connected. When he did his due diligence and looked into the esports area, he said things that I heard from behind the scenes, like to people, like, well, where's the franchising? Like, wait a minute, if I have a team, I can only make sponsor money. Why would I do that? Like, why would I make sponsor money and then give the players all the prize money? Like, how do we make money? Where's the merchandising? Where's the ticket sales? Where's the broadcast rights? And when he found out none of these things exist, and in the LCS, for example, you can just get relegated, he was basically just like, no thanks, I'll wait until there's like a legitimate infrastructure. So interestingly, he also didn't jump in when the Overwatch League came along, even though the Overwatch had some of the things he wanted in that sense. And the reason why I find that interesting personally is because, to me, he represents like the smart money. Like, he's not just a guy with money who's investing. As you can see, he's trying to actually understand something himself before he invests. It's the same reason I always told people I never got Bitcoin, because I still to this day don't really understand why Bitcoin was supposed to go up, because it didn't have like an actual real world value that matched its like value online. And I could, as a result, my assumption was this is just speculation. It'll go up, it'll go down. I won't ever know which it's going to be. So I won't get involved because I only want to invest my money in things I understand. So I at least think I have a chance to succeed, you know. So I find it very telling that, first of all, Mark Cuban didn't invest in any of these areas. But more importantly, as we're alluding to now, he's still been involved and made comments. And so the comment he made was that in games like League of Legends, like Overwatch, there was massive player burnout and people were practicing too much. Now, there's a lot we can get into on this one. So what do you think on this topic of player burnout? Like, is it a thing? Is it a problem?
It's absolutely a thing. We've seen it multiple times even, and people even break down on their streams. We've seen how people really were just sitting in front of their PC playing at least 10 to 12 hours a day. Now, do I think that's too much if you really want to win? Not really. In any real sport, you'll also put in the time and the effort and the hours. And some people stay later after practice to put in extra practice to perform better. And, as we can see, we see Simple, every time he goes to a tournament and he loses, he keeps adding more practice hours and time. He keeps investing more time. I think he was up at a ridiculous 14 hours or something a day, some days at 14 or 15 hours a day, like where he was effectively grinding matches. You have to realize that's absurd. At some point, you will break.
You know, the thing I found interesting about this was, first of all, some of the people who tried to rebut Mark Cuban, who were like industry people, you know, and people in the Overwatch League, for example, one of the first ways they tried to rebut him was say, like, well, actually, you know, those figures are wrong. No one really plays like 12 to 14 hours a day. You know, you maybe play like 3 to 4 like scrim blocks, or you play like, you know, 5 to 6 hours. And it's like, hold on a second, guys. Who the fuck lied to the media and told people like Mark Cuban you all play 12 hours a day? You guys in every fucking interview. It's just, I've told many players who were pro players who were friends of mine, you know, could you stop fucking saying you play 10 hours a day? You never played 10 hours once except like a boot camp or something, you know. And what they really mean is, on like a boot camp day or a practice day, I play 10 hours. But if you tell someone I play 10 hours a day, that sounds like it means every day. No. That sounds like it means every day you sit down, you do the 12 hours. So first of all, I agree with them. It's not as bad as Mark Cuban might think if he thinks people really play 14 hours. But a couple of other factors that are key to me is, one is, it's really about whether it's like mandatory to do those hours. Because as you allude to, if you're just some special individual, some Kobe Bryant, Wayne Gretzky type motherfucker, yeah, you're going to put in more hours because you're like the best person to ever play in your mind. So you're going to try and be the best player you can be. And you know, you're so driven, you're going to sacrifice everything. That's cool as long as the other dude can, you know, do his normal practice, say 3 or 4 hours in hockey, and then go home. As long as he can, no problem there. It's all about personal liberty. But this is the area where I think Mark Cuban doesn't know like the behind the scenes of esports enough to know why what he was suggesting doesn't make sense, which is he doesn't seem to be aware of Koreans. And here's the big problem. I have told so many Westerners in the past, I'm with you. I even think, since no one really knows like how far the human brain can stretch from like overuse, probably we should actually have like a hard cap. Like for example, okay, when I was thinking of becoming the culture fanatic, one of the things I planned to implement was I would get my players to buy in by telling them, listen, we're going to have these set hours for scrims, and it's never going to be more than 6 hours in a day. Now, on top of that, we might do like an hour or two of theory. Beyond that, play if you want to, scrim if you want to, play pickups if you want to, do whatever you want, but that's on you. And the reason why I was going to purposely do that is because, first of all, you'll never burn out from that amount. And secondly, it would be a clever way to explain to them that, like, because you're only going to play these 5 or 6 hours, I want you to play it in this specific way. Like on this game, I want you to focus on this one. And so the idea is, you know, you're not going to be too exhausted from doing it, so you can put max energy in. Whereas actually, a lot of people might not know this. Some people, when they play scrims, some of them are just like playing a game. You know, they just play the game. You don't learn much, win or lose. You go into the next game. Some of them even call like, that's my warm-up game. It's like, in practice, you probably shouldn't have that. But anyway, what I'm getting to here is, like, that would be great if we implement it in the West, but it would only work in our region. Like, yeah, if everyone in Europe played 6 hours, great. We'd all be a lot healthier, wouldn't have the mental strain, wouldn't burn out as much. Problem is, as we can all tell by what I alluded to, we'd go to Worlds, we'd go to MSI, we'd play these fuckers who were as good as us anyway and have been doing 14 hours a day. And they're probably going to get our ass handed to us. So the problem is, you will always have a competitive disadvantage to that guy. Like, I'll give you a great real-world example. This will sound very controversial for people who haven't thought it through, right? But one of the reasons why I actually understand why Donald Trump wants, for example, America to use what he calls clean coal technology, which as far as I can tell, it's kind of like a political name, which means using coal, but trying to make it slightly more environmentally friendly. Now, obviously, using coal is pretty bad. Like, you look at the effects, like fucking all the smog comes out, you just wrecking people with carbon, fossil fuels, etc. But here's the interesting detail people aren't understanding about that, is who gives a fuck what America is like and what world's like. Donald Trump's point of why he wants them to use this technology is to compete with China. Because if China is using coal burning, like factories and generators and stuff, and you aren't, and they're getting a cheaper, better energy source, they automatically have a competitive advantage. So unsurprisingly, they might beat you in manufacturing, in trade, in being able to keep margins down. So in that scenario, you can't go, we should all be more environmentally friendly. Like, okay, well, let's all do that when we're all poor and our countries are shit. Oh, what's that? Now the people who run the whole world will just change all the rules anyway, and we'll just have to follow that. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, in the abstract sense, they're right. But in the practical sense, it's not even that they're wrong. It's just that, yeah, it's just, you can't really sort of make it work. So that's kind of where I come down that player burnout one. I think it exists. It's just, unfortunately, in what is a very cutthroat business, it's going to be hard to tell a dude, like, listen, if you play any extra time, it might actually fuck you up. And he's going to be like, but will I win? You know, if I win now, maybe it's worth it, right?
Yeah. Some people really think that way. So, yeah.
Oh, and then also the other angle I'd probably say is it's kind of like MMA or the NFL. Like, I don't think they should make those sports too safe, because if you make them too safe, they're just not as good anymore. Yeah, so the problem is, even though I personally would never be an MMA fighter or an NFL player, even if I had the skill, because like the effect on your, like, I want to have like a functioning brain in about 20 years, you know. But I tell you what, if there's someone out there who wants to do that and he knows that is the risk and he is willing to accept it, I kind of feel like we should just sit back and it's up to him, you know.
Huh? Some of these guys are paid handsomely for taking a tackle. You know,
I mean, in a mad sense, it's no different than being like a fucking bodyguard. You might have to literally let yourself get shot, but you get a lot of money in exchange for it, you know. That's why you're willing to take that gig, and why, you know, you'll have a great time until then, and all the suits and great cars.
Risk and opportunity, payoff.
So I get why someone like Mark Cuban might say that. If I had to guess where he comes from politically, I think he's from like a sort of Democrat, big government type world where he would want, you know, some organizing body to mandate to everyone, you can only play this many hours and we're going to take care of you guys. But like I say, unless he understands Koreans and the fact that we're in a world, that ain't going to work, Mark. Like, it'd be a bad thing if we implemented your idea, mate. Esports would get way worse in the West.
We'd get blown out.
It'd be depressing. Like, I'm telling you, it just would be.
No doubt. Koreans are special in that way.
Well, also,
once they get their mind onto something, they don't let go. They just keep going, you know. It's very impressive to see also, because most people in the West just don't think that way.
Well, there's also the other angle, which is that because they know people might burn out and might not be as good in a year, they can be so cutthroat with some of the moves they do in those teams. Like people still don't seem to get this in the West. People, like, that's why I always say, like, it's kind of wild how people just fall over themselves. Like, Reaper, you're a fucking genius. Oh my God, you know, he took a star player out and put a sub in who's just a rookie. It's like, they've literally been doing that in Korea for years. Like, yeah. And in China as well, you know, like that's one of the things I always, like, in a mad way, like, respected. Like, I don't, for example, obviously people know if it's like you put Easy Hoon instead of Faker. I kind of feel like that's like you've gone too far with it on that one. But when it's like the players who actually legit are having issues, it's kind of ballsy to have a dude who you're paying loads of money and really have him on the bench, because you legitimately do think in this particular game, this rookie guy who we're paying nothing, or, you know, very little, like, hyperbole there, that guy might actually play better in the game. Like, as much as that sounds like an obvious choice to make, like sunken cost fallacy, there are so many teams in the West will keep that superstar name, and even if he's playing like shit, because they think, like, they even naively think, well, he's a famous player at least, whereas it's like, that's kind of not competitive mindset.
Yeah, it is. But I see certain teams do this, and then you think about it, and it's like, he has an Instagram following of X amount of people. He has a Twitter following of X amount of people. He can use brand awareness. Like, he could become a streamer for your brand if he doesn't work out in the long run. You know, like, all these things factor in for Western people. In Korea, they don't give a shit. They just care about results.
Oh, and also as well, to be fair, in Korea, the guy who gets benched isn't going to go on social media and even like vaguely imply that this is bullshit, you know, whereas pro players in the West, I always say this, you'll notice it's a common trend with me.
We're entitled.
The last few years, they have gotten so they have gotten way too much power. Like, because a lot of their power is kind of like passive power. Like, if you go on Twitter and say something, it doesn't make your coach have to put you in the game, but you could certainly make it very uncomfortable for him if he doesn't. And that's a real thing. Obviously, like, people know, like, the whole Meteor situation in 100 Thieves this year, the Cody Sun scenario when no one knew what was going on. People were going really hard on the org for this. Yeah, if this was like a Korean type scenario where they were like, listen, for the good of the org, we had to cut this guy and this guy wasn't playing well, you'd just accept it, wouldn't you? Because you'd go, I'm sure they know better than us.
Yeah, in Korea, you wouldn't hear a beat about it.
The big names really did sway people on those ones.
Sadly.
It's kind of wild.
And if your team loses then with the rookie, it's like, oh, well, you should have put this guy in. He was much better. It's like, just because of name value. If the guy's not performing, doesn't perform, better take your shot with the rookie then, I'd say. Yeah. Also, a very interesting point was that someone in that thread with Mark Cuban, he commented that... we don't allow our players to play X amounts like after our practice is over. Bullshit. I've seen certain of them stream live for more than 12 hours.
Of course.
How is that not them practicing more than those hours? You know, it was like, it makes no sense that you even dare say such a thing on Twitter. And it's like, here's proof. And you can go down a list of these guys' VODs. How long are they? Oh, X amount of hours.
Funny thing is, if Mark Cuban really wants to have his fucking mind blown wide open, I could tell him so much behind the scenes stuff that would literally make his mind melt. Like, I'll give you a great example. When I first got into watching the NBA, like, religiously, was in like the mid 2000s. And like, I think it was like in maybe 2007, the Lakers got a player from, I think it's maybe from like Bulgaria or something. His name was Radmanovic. Somewhere like that, somewhere in Eastern Europe, basically, or in like that sort of area, like Balkan type area. And whatever country this dude was from, there was the next season he had to miss the first bunch of games because he told the Lakers, oh yeah, I came out of my house one day and like my front step was really slippy and I slipped over and I've busted my wrist, so I can't play. And they found out from a friend of his that he'd lied and he'd actually gone snowboarding and he tripped over and he'd broken his wrist, right? Well, for people who don't know, this is what I'm getting to now, for why Mark Cuban's mind will be blown, is in sports like the NBA, certain teams make you sign contracts that say within it clauses like cannot play extreme sports, cannot do these things, because obviously their investment in you is huge. Yeah. And these things just like as far as the club's concerned, because obviously they don't get the enjoyment of like being on a snowboard. The only thing that can happen for them is best case scenario, you don't get injured. Anything else is like bad scenario. Like, why would you want even a chance? Well, here's the thing: if you were Mark Cuban, that would blow your tiny mind. If you just knew how many of the world's best players in games like League of Legends or CSGO not only are doing whatever the fuck they want in the off-season, but even worse, are going to bars and having fights where they're punching people with their mouse hand. Yeah. And the worst one ever, dude, was, I won't say which tournament it was, just because I don't want them to get hit, right?
I know the after-party story.
But there was a tournament that at the after-party had one of those boxing machines where, you know, it registers how hard you can punch the machine. And I'm not just, bearing in mind,
almost everyone did it.
Remember, most players in the world are right-handed. I just literally saw like a line of like, it was like fucking like Nico and Shocks and Simple. They were just going up to take turns to punch this thing as hard. And I was literally just sat on the sideline like, is this madness? Is this absolute madness? Like, if one of these guys busts their hand, they have fucked their whole team for like 6 months. Like, think about how long it could take for like a broken hand to fully recover, you know?
Minimum of 3 months, and that's if you like inject things into it. Is a minimum of 3 months.
It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah. It's crazy that people even do that. But
it's a bit like I once had a person, I won't say who it is, but I had a person who works in esports, but who originally comes from outside of esports. You know, they've worked in television, different fields. And they were complaining to me like, wow, the rates for these events are shit, man. And I was like, what are you talking about? These rates are like way better than they ever were. You know, if you did the same job like 3 years ago, you got like €600 for the whole 3 days or something, you know, like these rates are amazing. But what they meant was if you were even on like a low level Hollywood set, you know, you were getting like 3 times as much, or you got like, you know, well, obviously a thing you can sometimes get there is you get like all the health benefits and all that shit, you know, being in a union. So they couldn't believe how bad it was. But this is the point. Why I'm bringing this up is because actually the irony is people like Mark Cuban are looking how shitty esports is because it now is at the level where it's of interest to them. But they don't. What they're forgetting is everything before this practically was progress. Like, yeah, it's terrible now, you're right, but give it time and it might actually get to where you want it to be, and then you can come in. Because that's the thing, like I've alluded to, if he ever does come into like real esports, I'm going to assume he has an NBA 2K franchise, I think most of the NBA does, but I don't count that as real esports. I think it's like an artificial one. If he ever does get an LCS team or an Overwatch team or a CSGO, that's when I will get very interested then, because I think this is a guy who's smart in the sense of like, he isn't going to buy a team to flip it. He isn't going to buy it. If he buys a team, he's doing it thinking it's going to be the next NBA, and he wants his Dallas Mavericks of the CSGO franchising league or the Overwatch league, whatever it might be. So to me, that's why I find guys like that very interesting. Because by the way, whenever you see people online, I know it's a thing that, especially the Immortals guys, Lurpis, Noah, always push back against, is this idea that like you have all these idiots coming to esports, just spending all this money and not doing their due diligence. And it's like, you know, that's not true. There are definitely people who do some homework. But I will tell you this, I've known people who are real businessmen and they did their due diligence. It's just that the due diligence was wrong, as in they read a report that was full of shit, or they got a consultant that was full of shit, or they had a person from the industry, like the people I was referring to before, who do know the real info, but then they told them, yes, your players will play 10 hours a day because they had, you know, even the guys who actually could give the real info are selling the story. Because unfortunately, and this is the big problem that the Overwatch League has, is the big elephant in the room, the reason none of us are allowed to actually have real discussions about whether things are doing badly or whether things are fake is because people still have that same bullshit drive they had in the early days of esports, which is like, shh, don't say anything. If we let this thing get big enough, we can all succeed.
Profit.
I've never been that dude, you know. I'm the dude who, I think, I don't know if you saw it, but I did this episode of Listen Local with that guy who's the Misfits owner. Yeah. And I actually told a story, which sadly, I believe this story got fucking muted because stupid Local had like some music playing before that got. So since the guy doesn't record the VOD, it's just from his Twitch VOD. We never got this part. But basically, I told a story about how when Monte Cristo had to sell his teams, and he had the Renegades LCS squad and he had the Misfits European Challenger team, right? So he had to sell both. And so what happened was when he had to sell them, he was trying to get people to be buyers, you know, get interest. And he said to me, actually, I've got this guy, he's called Ben Spoon, who's looking into buying one of the teams, but he wants to talk to people who aren't me, basically, who aren't an owner of the team. And he said, would you talk to him? And I said, you know, if I talk to him, I'm just going to tell him what I actually think. Like, I'm not going to lie to him, mate, and tell him your team's better than it is. Or, like, for example, the Australian CSGO team was the one he had at the time. I said, I'm not going to lie and tell him that this team's going to be, like, in the fucking top 8 of the major, or that they'll even necessarily make the major. You know, I'm going to tell him legit what I actually think. I'm going to be fair as I can. And he said, okay, I trust you. Like, just say whatever's true. And as I told told on the Lurton Local episode, I did tell Ben Spoon a bunch of this stuff. Like, you know what, the Australian team probably never go anywhere unless you can convince them to get like a foreign player in, maybe get a better coach. The League of Legends team, I personally would just scrap that entirely, mate. It's a waste of time, that whole lineup, like bad players, washed up players. The European one has some promise, but then again, I would personally not get in a ULCS team because the ULCS at that point in time, we're talking about like 2 years ago, was fucking garbage. You wouldn't make any money. So I actually kind of was quite critical, but he ended up buying the team anyway. But he did it at least knowing like a realistic set of... I don't think people are getting that when they're buying these teams. You know, they're doing the best they can, but the big problem is, I don't blame them, because here's the problem. It actually should be someone like me or like Richard who's the one giving them this info, and unfortunately that's not our job. Like, we don't do that on the side. That's why in the future, I don't know when it'll be, but I do have plans in the future to make part of my time, like as a side job. I actually think I'll probably do some esports consulting. I'll just make it like, you know, I've got X amount of hours per week, you know, first come, first served. Here's my schedule, here's the price. And then, you know, the person comes in, they tell me what they want. Oh, I want a League of Legends team, here's my budget, like here's what my goals would be. And I'll just basically tell them stuff like, that's not realistic, like this player wouldn't be good. I actually hope I could do it from the angle of, I'm going to be the guy who tells you what not to do. Because for me, the biggest problem is putting your foot wrong. It's not like, there's plenty of good players you can get, but it's whether you get like the player where it's like, you paid way too much for that guy. Actually. Like, you know, don't buy Hooney for $1.5 million if I can get you like Otto Am there for 700k, you know, like this is the area where it would be worth people's money, I think. Yeah,
probably. Like the thing that interested me the most in this conversation about like how Mark Cuban goes about it, right? People like him actually look into it, and then you have bullshit esports consultants who are also on LinkedIn, and they fill you with a lot of shit. And we've seen this plenty of times, like sadly. And it turns out some of these teams, well, they go pop goes the bubble on that one because, well, they got bullshit information, you know, never works out for them.
It's caused one problem in that sense is like this is the reason why you can't get rid of bullshit esports consultants, right? It's not like a binary thing. There's not like the bullshit guy or the legit guy. There's like very few legit guys. There's very few like purely full of shit, like,
and then You have gray area.
But that gray area between is so big. And even worse, there's people in there who are legit. Like, for example, if you ask them about a specific scene or game, they would have info. But the big problem in esports is almost nobody out there will actually, who's in that position, will just admit, oh, I don't know about that team. Actually, I can't tell you about that player. Like, if someone asks me about a topic I don't know about, because I'm secure enough in the things I do know, I'll just say, I didn't watch that, mate. I don't follow that league. Or, you know, I'm not that familiar with this player. Or, you know, I've only seen a few games. So people don't realize it's not the end of the world because you don't know everything about esports. But there's way too many people who will just go on like, oh, he's asking me this. I don't want to look like I don't know. So what did my friend tell me? Or what do I think is the case on that one? And they'll give you that info. But the problem is, if you don't give the caveat that it's not legit info, someone's going to take that as gospel. And he's going to go and he's going to tell his people, like, we've got to get this player. That guy's, you know, this guy's not available. And that can obviously be so dangerous.
2 years ago.
Absolutely. You know, like, for example, is this player willing to move to North America? Yeah, you can't go on if he said 6 months ago he wasn't. Like, you've got to find someone who asked him now, right? Let's find out for this offer. There's so much nuance in that whole topic, unfortunately, but it's just a tough one because I can't, like, that's why I say I don't actually blame the big companies because how could you tell the difference? You know?
That is a hard one. Yeah. So, like, way too many people with shady pasts also try and come back into esports when they, like, fucked over companies. Like the new owners of Denial, by the way. Hello to you. Shout out to you fuckers, because you're also shady fucks. Don't care. Don't care. They are shady. He was banned by Adam Apicella, who's one of the nicest people in the industry. If you are banned by that guy to come to your event, you have done something wrong.
I saw that. It's because he made the mistake. I actually saw the video that the ban was based on. In this video, like, the guy who's this owner guy is addressing, like, you know, people are talking shit on me and, like, my team and all this stuff. And then he mentions, right, it's all fine until, like, the last 2 sentences or something. Because what he says is stuff like, you know, like, I'm legit, like, you know, you can come and meet me at any event and talk. But the problem is when he starts saying that you can meet him, he's, like, clearly, like, implying, like, you know, come see me at an event. Yeah. And then, unfortunately, this is what kills him. Even that would have been enough. Like, that's actually good enough euphemism. You could get away with it. But he makes the key mistake of saying at the end, like, I'm 6'4" and catted as fuck. So come see. It's like, well, that can't mean anything except that, can it, mate? Come on, like, that's so politically obvious. And I think he actually says, you know, if you come at me, I'll beat your ass or something. And what he doesn't realise is if you say that, as they should, you will be banned from the event. Like,
Absolutely.
This is one of the reasons why. Like, I don't know, like, a lot of pro players are nerds, mates. They wouldn't do anything anyway. But one of the main reasons why pro players won't go and punch someone who talk shit about them is because that would be, like, a massive point in their career that could really damage their career. Like, I mean, people forget this. You could also just ring the police in the place you are and get them arrested. Like,
Absolutely.
you know, why wouldn't you? In this scenario, they've physically assaulted you. You can't. I know people think in their brain. This is one of the problems I've always had with esports fans, because so many of them are young. You'll notice already that when it comes to like a dispute between two people, they just take the side of the person they're a fan of or who they think's a better player, which I've never understood. It's like,
think about this.
Think about this logically. If Shox and NBK have a difference in opinion, right? Obviously, I think Shox is a better player, but that doesn't mean NBK's points are wrong. Like, NBK might be entirely right. That's such an immature way of looking at it. Like, yeah, but Shox is cooler, so fuck NBK. What are you talking about, man? We're talking about the real world now, not an anime, you know. He's not the main character.
Plot armor.
You know, it's not like you're supposed to pull for him because he's the main character. You're like, if he's a douchebag, he's a douchebag. Like, you know,
exactly.
This is the way it is. Let me think. Let's think of another. What have we done so far?
Fan engagement was a tweet from you. How I believe it was something along the lines of how players are entitled and should act more professionally, and then something.
Oh, this was about the signing sessions.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, because the big problem is this: I've myself have found this at a few events I went to this year, where a thing I actually really appreciate, by the way, is that I actually, if I don't want to, I'm not constantly being exposed to all the fans at events, because there are certain events where, because like to walk out to the stage area, I have to walk past loads of areas where fans come up. Like, obviously, sometimes I'm walking out and I literally have a minute where I have to get there, but people are trying to come up and get signatures and stuff. And even though I tell them, listen, if you can wait 20 minutes till the segment's over and stand here, I'll come and do the signature. But, you know, some of them are walking somewhere. They're not going to do that, you know. And so I also get loads of people who will message me and they're like, hey, I'm at the event. Like, can you come outside now and do a signature? It's like, I can't do that, dude. Like, I'm in the middle of doing my job. Like, I can't. So unless the event makes time for me, like gives me a signing session, like at Epicenter, they did this. They brought us like half an hour early one day, and then when the fans will come in the arena, if they wanted to, they could come and get like all the signatures of the casters on the poster, you know. And the point is, that stuff, yeah, it takes a little bit more like wiggle room, you know. You have to like figure somewhere out in the schedule. You have to have someone set to be like take us there, announce it all. You have to have security. I understand there's logistical aspects to it, but people will underestimate how valuable that is to a fan, because yeah, you know what, the games being great is obviously the main thing you remember, but after the games being great, I think people will more fondly remember getting like, you know, fucking Neo's signature on a poster than even being in a great stadium and having the VIP package or whatever. Like, I think that's actually, to a lot of people, bearing in mind, you know, most people who go to live events, they might only go to one or two in a year. I think it's a big deal, right? I mean, from your own perspective, you go to a lot, but if you go to one,
a couple, yeah.
You want some access, right?
Events every year, but yeah, I go to Cologne every year, and I think they still have one of the best schedules, like for fans to meet teams. Because if your favorite team, for instance, is playing like SK, for example, back when they had the Brazilians, there was a kid in the arena who like was a day late and was expecting SK to get to a later stage, right?
Right.
And he wanted to get their signatures now. And like the way it was set up was the normal signature sessions were held a day before, right? And some of the premium ones are only for people with premium passes, such as, well, let's see, such as this one, right? Now, I had the liberty to go to one of these still, and I'm like, I'll get you those signatures, man, because like their signature date was yesterday, and he's like, okay, very unhappy, right? So I went there, got the signatures from a premium with my premium pass, and then went to the kid, gave him like the sign with it. You know, like some of these things are very important for people because they only get once in a lifetime sometimes, or like you say, they only go once a year, and if they then miss out on their team because they thought it was going to be a later time. ESL does like 2 signings for every team almost. So in that regard, I think they do a hell of a job. And they schedule it right, you know? Like, you have a schedule that's released, even with the dates. They even tweet it out, and they even put it on Facebook, I believe, when it was that you could get the signatures and everything. And they even tweeted out again, like, this team's doing their signing sessions. Players are also tweeting it out when they do. And then some of them, not everybody, but some of the players that are supposed to be there, because they lost, right? They go home. And when you still have then a signing session, that's where I actually feel bad for the people who are coming to the event. That should
that was one of the things I was alluding to with those tweets. Like, here's the thing. There's one angle, which is the angle actually, I think, ironically, before he was with, I guess it's not ironic, it's exactly what you'd expect. Before he was with Immortals/MIBR, Lurpus was one of the people who actually saw the players' side of it, which is, you know, if you have to go to a billion tournaments every year and, you know, the next tournament's in a week and you know you've been knocked out early, so you might be able to get 2 extra days at home. Sure, as a selfish person, that would be your obvious choice to do. I get that, and I get, by the way,
Absolutely.
if you're a player, why you'll try and fight for that if you can, because that would be a big value to you. But what I think he and the players are missing there is like what you said there, which is actually the team who goes out on day one, if they stay at the event, is going to be the easiest to schedule on the last day when the final is, because they've already, you know, they've had all the time off, they're not playing. That would be a perfect time for people who aren't fans of the team playing in the semi-final or the final to go and get this guy's signature, and in doing so make attending an event, and more crucially, because one thing I didn't say on Twitter is that every fan is entitled to the signature of their favourite player. Definitely not. But if you do it so it's consistent and you get your money's worth when you get those passes, and you definitely do, say you get a premium pass, get like,
Absolutely.
I don't know, 3 teams guaranteed that you'll get to see, you know, it might not be your favourite team, but 3 big teams. If you get like a guarantee, we can make this a real thing where if I have a kid and I know he's a big fan, I know, right, it's worth getting this like upgraded pass because he's going to get the signatures. That is going to help the actual like attendance aspect more than people realize, because obviously one of the things at the moment that sucks in esports is you can get the perfect venue, you can get the perfect event, teams, everything, but if you hit the wrong timing window, and no one really knows this, based on, you know, what area you're in and who attended what other events when, you might get a shit turnout, and it's really depressing. And so I actually feel as though that's the area that we can build up a lot. Same as I saw people were talking about how there's like a global elite package they have, I think it's for Katowice, and you know, it's like maybe like $400 or something, and people were arguing about whether it was worth it or not. This is an area where I know Sir Scoots actually, I don't think he's done it yet, but I know he wants to run a business that's like this, where it's like, it's only for high-end customers. So it's the equivalent of if, let's use the Mark Cuban example. If me and you really are balling out of control and we want to go and watch the Dallas Mavericks play, but we want to watch it from a sick environment, then obviously either we want to be courtside, like the best seats, or we want to be in our box, right? We want to get like a sky box, and we'll bring our friends and we'll have like drinks, and, you know, we'll have like a chill party there while we're doing it. People should surely be able to understand that when that costs like $10,000, that's not overvalued, because if me and you are balling out of control, we're willing to pay the $10,000. But the key element is it better be worth the 10K. As in, if we go there and we pay the 10K and we get the skybox and it turns out there's no fucking drinks in there and no one ever comes, and then we're going to go mental. So I don't get the people who are like, that's too much money. It's like, it's not supposed to be for you, mate. It's not price point.
I know for Cologne it's around €600 for a skybox of per person. A minimum.
That's pretty reasonable considering how many.
Of 5, you have unlimited drinks, you have quality food, and not just garbage food from the venue. Like, you have actual good food. Like, you have an amazing view, and then you get to look behind the scenes. You get a tour. Last year, I believe they even had dinner with like all the like elite guests, I believe.
Oh, okay.
It's like, that is worth it.
If you've got the money and you want that experience, that's the idea.
That is worth it. Absolutely. But yeah, as you allude to, like, some people contemplate it and are like, what do I get out of it? And then, you know, some people value things differently. But as you allude to, like, food, drinks, everything has to be accounted for if you get a skybox, you know, like.
The other thing as well is that some people thought that was like an unreasonable perspective I had, that like you should stick around, because they were like, why should we be obliged to do it? It's like, no, we're talking about teams who, with the organizer, agreed to do a signing on a certain day and then just went home. Like, at that point in time, you have given your word, you have agreed to do something. And by the way, that doesn't mean that the pro player wanted to do it, but that means his orgs agreed. Well, guess what? That org gets to say what he does because they pay him his salary.
Exactly.
Like, he could have negotiated his salary for a few K less and said, listen, I'll take less money, just don't send me the signing sessions. I'm sure many orgs would take that deal.
Plenty of people who will be willing to do that, but they don't want to give it.
That's why I considered the pro pro players entitled, because what they do is in every negotiation, they just negotiate for the highest dollar amount. They say yes to a million things they don't want to do, because part of them thinks, I'll get away, we're not doing some of that, you know. Famously, streaming hours is the most ridiculous one, you know, where they'll agree to do, like, I'll give you a random number, 20 streaming hours. They won't do any of the streaming, and then they'll just sort of begrudgingly do 1 month, like, right, I guess if I have to. And they'll have like a bad attitude about it. And I used to have a friend who was one of these players who was in a position like this, right? And he complained to me like, you know they're going to fine me if I don't do these hours. I said, you fucking agreed to it in your contract, what are you talking about? I said, you know, my job, I can't just keep doing like half my responsibilities, get the same money. Like, you're welcome to the real world.
That's the crazy thing. It's like, if you agree to something and you sign a contract, have you read through it? Like, what's in it? I mean, if you can't do that one, at least, like, why are you signing? If you can't read, don't sign.
I know. And that's just the definition of someone who's entitled, you know. He thinks that he should have everything his way all the time in exactly how he wants it, you know. Sadly, that's an area where I've done a lot. You notice I've pushed hard for this angle for the last year or two, but we still haven't got through to many of the players, mate. A lot of players still to this day think stupid shit like their org is making loads of money off them, and you know, they should get even more salary. Most of them are
losing money, if anything.
It's crazy, dude, because part of the problem is this. In League of Legends, if you remember, I once wrote an article where I said that every pro player should just like say how much his salary is, or there should be some official way to say it so that, like, you know, people could negotiate properly. And I had loads of top people, like commentators, team owners, telling me, what are you talking about? All of our players know each other. And I said, mate, I know your players. They are telling me the wrong numbers, you moron. Because guess what? When it's a pro player talking to another pro player, it's like anything. People exaggerate. I'm making 12k a month when he's making like 8k.
Swinging around, you know?
Yeah, it's like everyone's lying, trying to seem cooler and like they make more and they have a better situation. And then you have the rumours that, like, imagine I tell you a slightly wrong number. I say 9k instead of 8k. Well, then you misremember and tell your friend I'm making 10k, and then he tells his friend I'm making 12. It's like all of a sudden, you know, it's like
scales up.
Game of telephone. Yeah, it just goes mental. And so you have scenarios where it's nearly always inflation, but it's never the other way. It's never someone thinking, you only make 2k a month. No, I actually make 10k. It's always off the other way. And then as a result, you get players. This is the real problem, is you get a player who actually is being paid his market value and wouldn't get more elsewhere, but he wants to leave his team because he thinks he's getting half as much as he should. And he just doesn't know that either, you know, there's like 3 people can get paid that, you're not one of the 3, or if you go elsewhere, actually this team is the one that's willing to pay you close to that. No one else will. Like, they don't know those 2 angles. And so, sadly, I've seen a lot of people get fucked over by that angle. That's why, actually, if you saw, the weird thing about the Gen G lineup is their lineup generally would be trash, except that they got Peanut, right? That kind of makes their team.
Yeah.
Well, you notice that they purposely told Peanut, we're going to make you the highest paid jungler. Because that's a clever way to make a guy who's still pretty young. You know, he's had relatively good success. Yeah, of course. Tell him, listen, at your role, we guarantee you'll be the highest. But like, that's a pretty clever way to draw a guy in, you know.
And he has market value. Like, if he's your franchise player and you can keep him for a couple of years and he pays you off, I mean, you might be able to make some piece of money back.
Or even competitively, mate. Like I said, with Peanut in that lineup, you can do some things with that team. Without him, the team's way worse. So the key thing as well is, it might even be worth paying him more now if it means that, let's say Gen G, I'll give you like a realistic, not my prediction, but a realistic one. Let's say Gen G finishes 3rd in the LCK. Pretty good, so not terrible, you know, borderline maybe going to Worlds, could happen. That team, even if it just does that well, next year, now they're in a position, you add 1 more good piece, now you've got a really good team. But without Peanut, that doesn't happen. So every now and then, there is sort of implied value in overpaying a player like that.
And also, I get it. In the early days, some of these people would take pay cuts to play with each other, even though they're star players.
Yes.
Just
I have kind of a controversial opinion on that, which is, unless you are someone who really doesn't care about money, like to you, you know, you don't care, like you could live just as great a life with 15k a year as 150k, unless you're that guy. So clearly there's some people who really, like, I really respect it, because even back in the days of like 1.6 where you made fuck all, there were some players who just wanted to win and they would take half as much salary if it meant they were on the team that meant they could win. Like, you know, if they could get paid more for this other team, but if they went to this team that was smaller, but at the moment is better in the game, they'd do it. Right? Even though I respect that, with how esports currently is, like how much time it takes, the fact sometimes you have to move away, I personally think people should already start to behave the way they do in real sports leagues. Because famously in like American sports, for example, with the salary caps, it's really famous that when you win the championship, they're like not as good players go and get overpaid elsewhere, because it's your chance to get like a better salary. You know, you're only going to play 10 years. Why not get a couple of years at a high premium? There are some players who should probably do that, like just for their own, you know, health and where their career's at. They should try and get the big money. Like, they should go to China. They should go to a team that's smaller for more money. Because even though it's going to suck competitively, it might just lead to you having a better life overall.
There's a Belgian football player who left a really good team to go to China and get paid 20 million. I mean, that makes sense because he knows, hey, I only have X amount of years left in my career. Let me go get the money now while I can.
No, I can respect that. I mean, you know, there's a part of me as a purist wants to imagine, you know, we don't even think about money. We all just go to the best teams and try and win. Then again, though, I've also always thought as well.
That's not realistic because
like another problem I have is, like, I really generally, it's funny everyone else has now finally come around to my perspective in the NBA because they're all so salty about the Golden State Warriors having Kevin Durant. But I always felt like that.
Didn't he take a pay cut for that?
I don't know if he did, but the thing is, the other players in the team are still on rookie contracts, so like didn't have a max contract, so you could still afford it anyway. So they haven't broken any rules by doing that. It's one of the stupidest things about people complaining, but because people could have done this years ago technically. But the key thing for me is, I was always against that because personally, in his case, fair enough to him, he's like such an alpha. He joined that team, became the best player, won, and was the MVP. But with many other players, like, if you put too many stars in one team, it's going to take a hit on your legacy. You know, you can't be considered the same player if you were like, you had so much help and you won everything. So sometimes I think it is better to be the sort of Hall of Fame type player who didn't win very often, but like simple in Na'Vi now, but is clearly like a godlike player, you know, shows you what he's capable of. Every now and then it's worth it to be that guy, even if you won't get as much success. You know, I'm kind of a bit against like, stacking rosters.
If you win, then even though you're not in the best team, that just shows your excellence.
For sure. Yeah. Funnily enough, by the way,
you should appreciate. Like, excellence is something to appreciate. If people don't understand this, people who like only look at the like, oh, this team won the most championships. Yeah, but how good were their competitors? If you then look at their competitors and they're all like under like a certain metric, and they are not in the ability close to you, that just puts a taint on your legacy.
I mean, the funny thing is, we could even, to tie it back into the Mark Cuban theme, that actually is what happened to Mark Cuban's team, the Mavericks, in 2011. Like, they had a team that on paper probably should only have made like the first or second round of the NBA playoffs, but they had like a miracle run basically. And in their team, it actually wasn't a very good lineup. Like, they basically had Dirk Nowitzki, who was very, very good. And then they had a bunch of players who were like at the end of their career. Like Jason Kidd used to be a great player, but he was really old at the time, you know. Like Jason Terry was like right at the end of his career. Like Sean Merriam was very old and was just doing defense basically. Like, their team shouldn't have been able to win, but because that was the one championship that Dirk Nowitzki won, but he won it with a team that was like way underpowered. Oh. Like, his one championship to me is worth like two for someone who's on like a super stacked lineup, you know, at least. Like, that guy did it like a fucking, I call it like doing it the samurai way, because it's the idea of like doing it the most honorable way and like proving your worth, you know, not kind of like getting political advantage or someone just like sort of gifting you a victory, like being easy, you know. The idea is every victory you get that's like super hard like that, it's worth more. Like, each championship isn't identical, no way.
Yeah, absolutely. Same with like the Na'Vi lineup we have currently. When Simple goes ham and Electronic goes ham compared to some of these teams, you can make a point that it's absolutely amazingly beautiful to see them win, finally. Because Astralis is so excellent. People undervalue Team Liquid. Their excellence this year was great. Sure. Every time you saw them play, they were just barely... They were very closely matched to Astralis, I think. Just that Astralis is just that good. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the things I'm going to have to look up for sure. I'm going to do a piece on that particular rivalry, especially now that the lineup's changed, you know, so I can set that lineup in stone and kind of run it down. But that's one of the things I'm definitely going to look into that people haven't at the moment, because Team Liquid didn't win that many maps against Astralis, people think it wasn't a close rivalry.
Oh, some of
like,
were close.
In a certain context, I always felt like Team Liquid played them pretty close in a lot of those maps, you know. Like, there was the odd one that was a blowout, but most of them felt like they were always competitive.
Most of them were very competitive up until a point where you got to match point, and then like right before you hit 14, 15, that's where you saw them drop off, Team Liquid, right? But up until that point, they were always in the game, it felt. Like,
okay. All right, let's do one more big topic then. Let's pick one more topic. We'll do that and then we'll call this thing. Let me think. Yeah, what would be a good one? So let me think. We've done quite a lot on CSGO. We did a little bit on League of Legends. What was the other game you watched?
Quake.
Was there any other esports you watched though?
No, currently not.
Let me think. What could we do one on then? Oh, okay. I'll give you one, which is right. There are two pieces of information that is not publicly known. I mean, people might have heard some of this on By the Numbers, but even then, we were never like officially saying it. Like as Richard has said many, many times before, if we say something in a speculatory manner on By the Numbers, that's just our personal opinion or a guess. We're not going to usually waste that short with breaking a piece of news, because if you're going to break a piece of news, you're going to do it as an article, get all the money from it. You know, it's going to be like an official thing. So I'm saying this as unofficial information, but it is legit. Like my sources are bang on for this. So earlier in the year, we're talking like maybe half a year ago, maybe 3 or 4, maybe 4 to 5 months ago, like that sort of a time distance back. I had heard rumblings from a number of high level people that there might be a franchised league coming with Valve's backing that would be in CSGO. And that, you know, obviously certain team owners are definitely in favor of that who come from the other games, you know. But here's the interesting detail. I only heard it from a few very legit people, and I heard from others like, oh, there was maybe some talks about that. But this is the interesting detail. The people who told me are also the kind of people from other esports games who really want there to be a franchised league in CSGO, like in other games. So I feel like it was half something that was being discussed, like at least thought about, and it was half something where them telling me was their attempt to influence me to tell the scene, to make a fake hype, which would then make Valve, who maybe is just even thought about the idea, like, oh, maybe people would like this, you know. Like, I think I was kind of being played like that, because one thing you learn if you're like me or Richard is people will give you info sometimes to directly use you as a pawn in their own little Game of Thrones, you know, and you have to know when that information's like potentially bullshit. And that's where every now and then you get a story where it's like, I don't necessarily know whether this story is like legit or whether it's been sort of sexed up and juiced up a bit. And the other angle, the other thing that they told me was more recently, within the last like couple of months, I mentioned this in my video about ESL Pro League's changes. I had heard that basically there was like a mini battle between ESL and EPL, or ECS and EPL rather, over whether teams would end up dropping one of these leagues. And so it became sort of like a bidding war where it was like each league was trying to tell the teams and their representatives, we would give you this, we would offer you X, oh, we'll give you Y and then Z as well. Yeah, but if we give you X, we'll give you A and B, and, you know, we'll give you part of Y as well. Like, they were all trying to like battle for each other. And the reason why is because people like, as far as I know, it was like Face and ECS were the ones that were scared. They were worried that they can't offer much more than what they currently have, but they knew that ESL might go out and do what they've basically done, which is make like offline elements, give extra thing. And so the interesting thing is, I think the two stories aren't entirely disconnected. Like, it's clear that teams want there to be less competitions. They want more like stability. They want to know what events there are before the year starts. They don't want all this sort of like confusion and like, should I attend this event, or will there be a down period in 6 months, or I shouldn't and then I'll need more time off, or should it take it now in case I don't qualify for the next event? Like, things are so confusing that like nothing's determined completely, but I'm certainly interested because I personally, I'm selfish. I don't want to see one league like LCS. I want to see all the great games, you know. So as a selfish individual, I would say no to that. But business-wise, it might not be wrong. There might be a logic to it. What do you think if that was to happen? If CSGO either got like, if we either swapped to one online league, I mean, it's offline now anyway for EPL, or we made a franchise league, like for what it, you know, it can be any terms you want. It can be like Overwatch style, so we can still have a third-party circuit, or it could be, or LCS where there's only this league, you know, it's the Premier League of CS and that's all.
If we're going third-party, I still want Valve to be like hands-off, because Overwatch League is like, once Blizzard got into it, right, with Overwatch League, they just pulled the plug out of so many side circuits like Apex, where we got to see great games. It's like, wait, we can't see that anymore? It's like, I don't really like that one when they get too hands-on, you know. So I kind of like Valve because they stay hands-off most of the time. So
for you, it's a big distinction if the same thing happens, but the difference is it's like ESL or it's DreamHack or someone else is the one running the circuit.
Yeah, third-party business one. I would say if you have like currently the two leagues competing against each other and then they fight for whoever gets it, yeah, sure. Fine. Just give like a certain thing. If Valve sets like terms, you have to have these conditions at the very least and then start bidding. Go at it.
That's one thing where I would actually, maybe I'll do an esports salon episode on this topic, because what I think would be very interesting is if I got people who are working in Dota at the moment and asked them whether or not they think that this would be good for CSGO. Because the reason why it would be interesting to get the Dota people is because on the surface, I kind of like the Dota Pro Circuit approach, where you still have tons of tournaments, but crucially they have like the Pro Circuit element because Valve put a system in place. But here's the detail that I don't know is I like that because it's kind of like having an open circuit, but you know exactly when the events are and they all count towards qualifying you to the equivalent of the major, you know. The problem I have is I wonder if people who are in the circuit like ESL would argue that, okay, we don't mind it for Dota, but for CSGO, you know, because Valve decides who gets which event, maybe they would argue we don't get as much creativity. You know, we can't put on an event out of nowhere and make it super epic in this one place that we hadn't thought of. Like, I don't know if they would have a good angle. That's why I say maybe I'll do an episode on it, because on the surface it seems pretty surefire to be a good thing, but I could see there being downsides. It's always hard to know logistically, you know.
That's actually true. You just touched upon a point, because we would have never gotten Cologne if there was a set schedule in the first place, because Cologne was not on the map at that point in time. Like 2014, they got the major, and they just happened to host it there. Like remember, the first one was in Gamescom, not in the arena we have now. Yeah. So they made it a yearly event because it was sold out the first year. The first year you couldn't get into the venue unless you had like a press pass. Even people from the press couldn't get in because it was actually full.
I also think, as a side topic, because people never bring this up either, mate, is another thing that I think 100% should be the case is, okay, right, at least always tell us roughly when the majors are for the year. Even if you don't really know who it is yet and what it is, like, just as like a team, if I'm the general manager of pick any team, Fnatic, right, I want it to be that if I know the second major of the year is, like, let's use this year's schedule. So the first major was at the very beginning, and then the second major ended up being, we didn't know this at the time, obviously in September or so, for the
early September.
Right? If I knew that in advance, I might do my roster moves very differently. Like how many events I'll give you as an extra chance, and you know how much of leeway I give to this player, or whether I need results from a different player. Like I would change my timing on that very differently, because you look at how many times we go into these majors with teams not having full lineups. It's crazy, isn't it?
Even now we still have one like that doesn't have a full roster. So yeah, it's absolutely insane. Actually, that is true. That's a nice point, because I based my summer schedule so I could go to the major, and I couldn't go because I didn't know when to fucking go. Congratulations. My holiday runs out a week earlier. Fuck me.
Yeah. The thing is, you really did get fucked on that, mate, because apparently the behind the scenes info was that they were going to put the major before the player break, like they had in the past, you know, but that they didn't because, as usual, the stupid players, who, by the way, can't be trusted to even know what they themselves want, said, no, it'd be better after the player break. And then afterwards, they themselves had the goal to go like, yeah, you're right, Thorin, it's fucking shit how we've all been on holiday and now I'm expected to play a major. It's like, you're the ones who did that. Like, what are you talking about? No one else wanted that except you.
That is true. You got to decide, and then it's still not good enough. What is it? Can't make up your mind?
Sadly, that's like a famous thing with players as well, you know. Like they think they want something, but the problem is they haven't thought it through. Like I always give this example as well on that topic is they were the ones who made IEM do that format where it was round robin with 6 teams and best of ones, which as we've seen now, it's got to be one of the worst formats out there. It's pretty garbage, you know. But they picked that, and then they also had the goal to do the same thing, mate, which is when their team was the one that didn't make it out of that, be like, this format needs to be changed, you know. I love GSL system. It's like, you're the ones who changed from GSL system. What are you talking about? Like, you can't win with some of these guys, you know. I think we should just end on that note. Just players being entitled idiots and laughing at them. We should just end on that, isn't it? You know, because I don't blame them entirely. A lot of them are young guys, you know, but they can be their own worst enemy, most certainly at some point in time.
Once you grow older, it does dawn on you like, oh, fuck, I made a mistake in the past and now I'm going to pay for it. Or I was an idiot in the past and it's like, now that I look back on it, that wasn't the best idea.
Yeah. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas, Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, James Harding, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my upcoming content? Perhaps you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA. Do you want to see some teasers? See who's going to be the next guest on one of my shows? Maybe you want to take part in an esports discussion with me. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.